Violet Jessop was a woman who saw things most people never would. She worked on ships, big ships, famous ships, and she survived when some of those ships sank. Not just one ship, but two. And she was on another one when it crashed. Her story is about luck. It is about strength. It is about a life spent at sea, facing dangers that seem impossible. She was known as Miss Unsinkable. But she was just a person doing her job, a person who kept going no matter what. Violet Jessop started her life far from the ocean. She was born in Argentina. Her parents were Irish. They had moved there to farm sheep. Her dad's name was William. Her mom's name was Catherine. Violet was the oldest of 9 kids. It was a big family, and life was not easy. The farm was in the countryside. It was hot. It was hard work. But the family stayed together. When Violet was little, she got very sick. She had tuberculosis. It was a serious lung disease. Doctors told her parents bad news. They said Violet would probably not live. They expected her to die. But Violet did not die. She fought the sickness. She got better. This was her first big survival. It showed she had a strong will, right? A will to live. It was a sign of what was to come. The family had more tough times. And Violet's dad, William, died when she was a teenager. This hit them hard. Her mother, Catherine, had to find work. She needed to support her children. Catherine got a job as a ship stewardess. It was a way to make money. It meant being away from home, but it paid the bills. Then, Catherine also got sick. She could not work anymore. Violet was the oldest. She felt she had to help. She had to take care of her family. She decided to follow her mother. She would become a stewardess too. It was a brave choice. She was only 21. Becoming a stewardess was not simple. It was a competitive job. You had to look a certain way. You had to be polite. You had to be strong enough for the work. Violet was young. She was pretty. People often told her she was too pretty for the job. They worried male passengers would bother her. Her mother warned her about this. Her mother told her to dress plainly, to tie her hair back, to make herself look less appealing. Violet did what she could. She needed the work. In 1908, Violet got her first job. She worked for the Royal Mail Line. Her first ship was the Orinoco. It sailed between Europe and South America. She learned quickly. A stewardess's job was many things. She made beds. She cleaned cabins. She served meals. She helped passengers with their needs. It was long hours. It was tiring. But it was also exciting. She got to see new places. She met different kinds of people. She was earning her own money. She was helping her family. She spent 2 years with the Royal Mail Line. She sailed to Brazil, to Argentina. She saw parts of the world she never imagined. But she wanted more. She heard about other shipping lines, bigger ships, grand voyages. The White Star Line was one of them. It was famous for its luxury liners, ships that were like floating hotels. She wanted to work for them. She wanted to be on the best ships, so she applied. She hoped for a chance. She got it. She joined the White Star Line in 1911. Her life at sea was about to get much bigger, much more eventful. She was ready for it, or she thought she was. No one could ever really be ready for what she would face. Violet joined the White Star Line in 1911. This was a big step up. White Star Line had the grandest ships. They were known for luxury, they were known for speed, they were known for comfort. Violet started working on the RMS Olympic. This was a massive ship. It was the largest ship in the world at the time. It was the first of 3 sister ships. The other 2 were the Titanic and the Britannic. They were all built to be magnificent. Working on the Olympic was different from her old ship. The passengers were often wealthier. The service expected was higher. Violet was a first-class stewardess. She took care of people in the fancy cabins. She made sure they had everything they needed. She was always busy. The ship was like a small city. There were hundreds of crew members. There were thousands of passengers. She navigated the long hallways. She learned the ship's layout. She got used to the rhythm of life at sea. The ship was grand. It felt safe. It felt solid. But then, something happened. Not long after she started on the Olympic, the ship had an accident. It was September 20th, 1911. The Olympic was sailing near the Isle of Wight. It was heading out to sea. And then it hit another ship. This ship was a warship. It was called HMS Hawke. The Hawke was smaller. It was an armored cruiser. The 2 ships were in a narrow channel. Maybe a suction effect pulled them together. No one really knew for sure. Violet felt the crash. It was a jolt, a sudden impact. Not a gentle bump. She was on board when it happened. She described it later. She said there was a loud scrape. A shudder through the whole ship. It was startling. She worried. Everyone worried. People rushed to see what happened. The damage was clear. The Olympic had a big hole in its side. The Hawk had damage to its bow. Both ships were hurt, but the Olympic was a huge vessel. It stayed afloat. It could still move. It had to turn back. It went to Belfast for repairs. It was a serious accident. It could have been much worse. Violet was not injured. No passengers were seriously hurt. It was a close call. The ship limped back to port. It needed a lot of work. The repairs took time. They delayed the launch of the Titanic. Because they used parts meant for the Titanic to fix the Olympic, this incident was a big deal. It made people think. It made them question. Was a ship truly unsinkable? No one said it directly. But the idea was there. The Olympic was meant to be the best, yet it had this crash. As for Violet, it was her first major sea incident. It was her first brush with a sinking, even if it didn't sink. It could have made her leave the sea. She could have said, "This is too dangerous." But she didn't. She stayed. She liked her job. She needed her job. She believed in the ship. She believed in the White Star Line. She kept working on other ships while the Olympic was repaired. She continued to serve passengers, to clean cabins, to live her life at sea. But the memory of that crash stayed with her. It was a reminder. A big ship can still get damaged. A big ship can still have problems. She did not know that a much bigger problem was waiting for her. It was waiting on the next ship she would work on. A ship called the Titanic. A ship everyone called Unsinkable. She was about to find out how wrong they were. After the Olympics accident and repairs, Violet Jessop was transferred. She moved to the newest ship. The grandest ship. The RMS Titanic. Everyone talked about the Titanic. It was an engineering marvel. It was bigger than the Olympic, it was faster, it was more luxurious, it had more safety features. Everyone called it Unsinkable. It was supposed to be the safest ship ever built. Violet joined the Titanic as a stewardess. She was excited. It was a prestigious ship. It meant good tips, it meant good work. She was assigned to first-class cabins again. Her job was to care for the wealthy passengers, to make sure they had a comfortable journey. The ship was beautiful, the interiors were grand, there were fancy dining rooms. There were swimming pools, there were squash courts. It felt like a floating palace. The Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage. This was April 10th, 1912. It left Southampton, England. It picked up passengers in Cherbourg, France, and then in Queenstown, Ireland. It was heading to New York City. Violet was one of the many crew members. There were about 900 crew on board, and over 1,300 passengers. The ship was full of hope, full of dreams. People were excited about this new journey. The first few days were smooth. The weather was calm. The ocean was flat. Violet did her work. She served breakfast in bed. She helped ladies get dressed. She ran errands. She made small talk. She saw the happy faces of the passengers. They were enjoying their trip. She was enjoying hers too. But the calmness did not last. On the night of April 14th, 1912, things changed. It was Sunday. The ship was sailing fast. Too fast. The air was very cold. The sea was still. Too still. There was no moon. No waves to show icebergs. Around 11:40 p.m., a lookout spotted something. An iceberg. Right in their path. The crew tried to turn the ship, but it was too late. The Titanic scraped along the iceberg. It was not a head-on crash. It was a long, deep scrape. Along the side, below the waterline, Violet was resting in her bunk when it happened. She felt a shudder. A slight vibration. It was not as violent as the Olympics collision. But it was different. It felt wrong. She got up quickly. She knew what to do. Crew members had orders. They had to help passengers. She went to her assigned station. She helped direct passengers. She helped them put on their life belts. She told them to go up to the boat deck. She stayed calm. She saw many confused faces, many scared faces. Some people did not believe the ship was sinking. They thought it was just a small problem. After all, it was the unsinkable Titanic. But it was sinking. Water was pouring into the lower decks. The ship's band played music, trying to keep spirits up, trying to keep order. Violet helped women and children get into lifeboats. Lifeboats were lowered one by one. Many were not full. People did not want to leave the warm ship. They did not believe it was sinking, or they were too afraid. Violet was ordered into lifeboat 16. A ship's officer told her to get in. He wanted her to show other women that it was safe. As she got into the lifeboat, someone handed her a baby, a small, wrapped bundle. She held the baby close. She did not know whose baby it was. She just held it. The lifeboat was lowered slowly. Down to the dark, freezing water. From the lifeboat, she watched. she saw the Titanic. It started to tilt. The bow went down first, the stern rose high into the air, the lights flickered. And then they went out. The ship broke apart. The sounds were terrible. The screams of people in the water. The crash of the ship breaking up. It was a nightmare. Lifeboat 16 rowed away. They tried to get away from the sinking ship, away from the screams. Violet held the baby. She listened to the terrible sounds fade. It was cold, so very cold. They waited for hours in the dark, in the freezing water. Finally, in the early morning, a ship appeared. It was the RMS Carpathia. The Carpathia had steamed through the night. To come to rescue them, they were pulled onto the Carpathia. Violet was exhausted. She was relieved, but she was also in shock. She gave the baby back to a woman who rushed up to her. The woman grabbed the baby. She hugged it tight. She did not say a word to Violet. Just took her baby back. Violet never knew who the baby or the woman were. The Carpathia took them to New York. The scale of the disaster became clear. Over 1,500 people died. Only about 700 survived. Violet was one of them. She had lived through the Unsinkable. She had seen the Unsinkable ship go down. It was a terrible memory, a deep trauma. But still, she went back to sea. She had survived. She needed to work. She needed to live. She didn't know yet that her next ship, another sister, would also face disaster. After the Titanic disaster, Violet Jessop was a survivor. It was a horrific experience. Many people who lived through it never went to sea again. The memories were too painful. The fear was too great, but Violet was different. She kept working. She needed the money. She also loved the sea, despite its dangers. She went back to the White Star Line. She worked on other ships. Then, World War I began. It was 1914. Life changed for everyone. Ships were not just for passengers anymore. Many were used for the war. They became troop transports. Or hospital ships. The dangers at sea grew. There were submarines, there were mines. The ocean became a battlefield. Violet decided to help. She joined the British Red Cross. And she became a Red Cross stewardess. This meant working on hospital ships. These ships carried wounded soldiers. They took them from the battlefields back home. It was dangerous work, but it was important. Her next assignment was on another sister ship. It was the RMS Britannic. The Britannic was the largest of the 3 Olympic-class ships, even bigger than the Titanic. It was launched in 1914, but because of the war, it never carried passengers. It was immediately converted into a hospital ship. It was painted white. It had big red crosses on its sides. This was meant to protect it, to show it was carrying the sick and wounded. It was supposed to be safe from attack. Violet started working on the Britannic in 1915. She helped care for the wounded. She made them comfortable. She listened to their stories. It was a very different atmosphere from the luxury liners. It was a serious, somber job. But she did it well. She was good at caring for people. The Britannic made several successful voyages. It sailed in the Aegean Sea, between England and the Dardanelles, picking up injured soldiers. It was a vital link, but the war made all sea travel risky, even for hospital ships. On November 21st, 1916, the Britannic was sailing in the Aegean Sea. It was near the Greek island of Kea. Violet was on board. She was in her cabin at the time. Suddenly, there was a big explosion, a violent tremor. It shook the whole ship. It was much louder than the Titanic's collision. It was a massive blast. Water rushed in, fast, much faster than on the Titanic. The explosion was on the starboard side, near the bow. It created a huge hole. Some said it was a German mine, others said it was a torpedo. No one truly knew for sure at the time, but the ship was mortally wounded. It began to list heavily. Violet remembered the orders from the Titanic. Women and children first. But this time it was different. There were no women and children passengers, just crew and wounded soldiers. Many of the wounded could not move on their own. The crew had to help them, get them to lifeboats, get them off the ship. The Britannic was sinking very quickly, even faster than the Titanic. Within minutes, the list was severe. The captain tried to beach the ship, to run it aground on Key Island, to save it. But it was too far. The propellers were still turning. Turning dangerously, Violet got into a lifeboat. She helped others get in. But then, a terrible thing happened. The propellers were still spinning. They were powerful, deadly. As the ship tilted, the propellers rose partly out of the water. But they were still moving. A lifeboat full of people was pulled into them. It was shredded. People were killed instantly. It was a horrifying sight. Violet's lifeboat was also pulled towards the spinning blades. She jumped out. She knew she had to get away. She took a deep breath and went into the water. She swam hard, away from the ship, away from the danger. She resurfaced. But then, she was sucked under the keel of the ship. The huge hull of the Britannic was pulling her down. She hit her head. Hard. She felt herself being dragged. She thought she was going to die, but somehow she got free. She popped back up to the surface. Someone pulled her into another lifeboat. She was dazed, bleeding from her head. She had a bad concussion, but she was alive. Again. The Britannic sank in just 55 minutes. It was incredibly fast, much faster than the Titanic, which took over 2 hours. 30 people died in the Britannic sinking. Most of them were from the lifeboats that were caught by the propellers. It was a tragic loss. For Violet, it was her third major sea incident, her second sinking. She had been on all 3 Olympic-class ships. All 3 had met with disaster. She had survived them all. It was almost unbelievable, but she did it. She had an incredible will to live. After the Britannic sinking, Violet Jessop was really hurt. Not just her body, but her mind too. She had a serious head injury. She probably had a concussion. But she lived. She had survived 3 huge sea disasters: the Olympic collision, the Titanic sinking, the Britannic sinking. Most people would have quit the sea for good. They would have found a job on land, but not Violet. She recovered, and she went back to work. She was still a stewardess. She worked for other shipping lines, not just White Star Line. She worked for the Red Star Line and the Royal Mail Line again. She kept sailing the oceans for decades. It was her life. It was what she knew. She served on many different ships. She saw the world. She met countless people. She carried on as if nothing had happened. But the memories were always with her. She never really talked about them much, not directly. She just kept living her life, doing her job. She worked through the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. She saw changes in ships, changes in travel, changes in the world. She was good at her job. She was quiet, she was efficient, she was a professional. She retired from the sea in 1950. She was 63 years old then. She had spent 42 years working on ships, most of her adult life. After she retired, she bought a small cottage. It was in Suffolk, England. She lived a quiet life there. And she tended her garden. She had her memories. She never married. She never had children. But she had a very full life, full of adventure, full of danger, full of survival. Years later, she decided to write down her story. She wrote her memoirs. She wrote about her life, about her time on the ships, about the accidents. She wrote it all down. She called it Titanic Survivor. It was published after she died. This is how many people learned about her amazing experiences. Violet Jessop died in 1971. She was 83 years old. She had lived a long life, a life few could imagine. Her story became famous. People called her Miss Unsinkable because she kept surviving. No matter what happened to the ships around her, she had an amazing spirit, a strong will. Her story teaches us things. It teaches us about human resilience, how someone can face such terrible things and keep going, how they can pick themselves up and carry on with their life. It also shows us about the sea, how beautiful and powerful it can be, how dangerous it can be too. Violet Jessop was not looking for fame. She was just doing her job. She was a working woman, trying to make a living, helping her family. Her story is real. It is honest. It is about a woman who simply refused to sink. Just like she refused to die as a child, she was a quiet hero, a survivor who saw history happen from the decks of the world's grandest ships, and she lived to tell about it. That is why we remember her. That is why her story stays with us. It is a story about the strength of a human spirit, a spirit that would not give up, no matter how many times fate tried to pull her down.